Okay, we're starting. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Adobe Photoshop Creative Cloud. We're going to go ahead and open an existing file that we have here. It's our shark drawing. There it is right there. I'm going to open up this one. So there's our shark drawing. I want to make sure that it's a good resolution. So it's 20 by 13, 300 resolution. Wow, that's impressive. That's pretty high. I do have a reference, just quick Google search here open on my other monitor, just to have something as inspiration to interpret what this shark is going to start to do as we add the color. Okay. Let me copy this layer. Let me switch this workspace to painting. And then I will go ahead and reset painting. And let's go to the brush. Okay, the brush is doing something. Okay.
Let's go ahead and look at the layers panel. I'm going to be creating new layers and I'm going to be labeling them according to what I'm going to be putting on that layer. Okay, so one of the layers is ocean. Another layer is going to be shark. This is a fairly simple composition. We just have that one main shark in the foreground and the rest of it is the background. I'm also going to create a layer and just fill it with white so that the two layers, when they multiply together, we don't have a double drawing.
So depending on how I arrange these layers, the background copy, I'm going to put it all the way at the top. And then I'm going to turn on multiply. Okay. So you see now we're seeing twice as dark because we're seeing down all the way to this one. But if the fill with white layer is going to block this multiply layer from interacting with the background layer. So all that I have to do for that is just go to edit, fill, and just fill with white. I have that layer selected. I'm going to fill it with white and it automatically lightens it. So we're not doubling this shark drawing. We're only seeing one of them and that's going to multiply down to this other stuff. So the shark color is going to be in front of the ocean. Okay, so we're going to paint in the ocean. We could do a couple of things to the ocean. I'm going to add a little bit of texture of water above the shark. And because of that, the sunlight is going to be hitting the top of the water here. So we're going to do a gradient fill with two colors. Okay, and we're actually going to make it circular. Okay, so now I have to choose my two colors. The first color is going to be a kind of Caribbean light blue grayish color. And then the darker color will be a deeper ocean kind of blue. And then once I click and drag, I will go ahead and fill that layer. I'm going to leave this on normal. I'm going to raise the opacity all the way up. And once I, bam, it already looks like it's underwater, just like that. Okay, so here all by itself, this is my ocean layer that already looks like it's underwater. Okay. So I have to get rid of these blue sketches here. I'm going to touch up this layer so that it's not as dark. I'm going to start by going ahead and desaturating it, which will take some of that yellow out of the paper. And that's just going under image adjustments, hue and saturation. And I just lowered the saturation, right? So from there, I'm going to go ahead and play a little bit more with the contrast using levels. Okay, so levels gives you a histogram, which is a bar chart of the amounts of each of the levels. The lowest level is the shadows, the middle is the midtones, and the highlights are way over here. So wherever you adjust these arrows, when you slide them, it's going to adjust the levels within the image. Okay, so I'm trying to go for just pure a nice light paper color with a nice dark for the shadows, but I don't want to lose my detail in the darker parts of the drawing. So I'm going to make sure that that stays nice and open in terms of its value. And then to get rid of the line drawings that are most prominent, I'm actually going to use a photography editing tool, which is known as the spot healing brush, okay? So with the spot healing brush, you adjust the size of the brush. There's a couple of different places where you could adjust the size of a brush. There's a keyboard shortcut that allows you to do it. It's just the right and left bracket. So once I paint, Photoshop knows that this is a kind of like a blemish in the paper. So all that I'm doing is clicking and dragging a little bit at a time, and it's taking the white paper that's around the blemish and it's copying it into where I paint. So the spot healing brush is mostly used to remove blemishes or spots on a photograph, but it works perfectly fine for what we're doing here, just to get rid of some of this. I hold down the space bar to pan around the image, okay? So if you get too close to something else, the spot healing brush is going to copy that into what you're doing. So whenever you're approaching an edge of something else that's different and you're trying to remove a spot, you have to be careful. So you always want kind of an even color around where you're painting with the spot healing brush, or it might start to copy stuff that you don't want it to. The tool that gives you more control about what you're copying into the area that you're trying to touch up, that tool, you see how I copied it again, right? So that tool is the clone stamp tool, okay? So the clone stamp tool allows you to say, hey, Photoshop, I want you to register this area so that when I click and drag, it's copying where the other crosshairs are down into that part of the drawing, right? So by holding Alt on the keyboard, you just click and say, hey, Photoshop, this is my target area. Go ahead and copy. Once I click and drag, it starts to copy that area into the other part of the brush. So that is cloning the pixels. That's why it's a clone stamp, because it works like a stamp and it's cloning the pixels somewhere else, depending on what you say is your registration point, okay? So I'm only trying to erase the blue parts of this shark drawing. So the nice thing about Photoshop is there's usually more than one way to do the same thing, or something that is very similar and not even noticeable, right? So I'm going to continue using the clone stamp tool here just to get rid of a couple more of these lines.
Okay, so this is where the digital painting fun part of Photoshop starts. I now have a much cleaner line drawing that I could start to play around with brush sizes, with the brush pressure, the opacity of the brush. So I'm starting to layer this nice warm color that represents the sunlight kind of hitting the top of the shark. And as you can see, I'm playing around a lot with the size of the brush and the opacity. So every time that, let's say the brush is on, 30% opacity, when you paint over whatever is there, it's like a lighter kind of ghosty, dried out marker kind of a feel. So if you go over that part again, you're starting to build up the color that way. And this is actually one of my favorite ways to render digitally when I'm painting. I'll use a brush that has a little bit of texture along the edges so that it feels like the brush has a good personality. And then I'll go ahead and lower the opacity and kind of go over it a couple of times, trying to control the pressure that I'm using. And that does give it this very nice blended without over blending, super airbrushy, fake Photoshoppy kind of look, right? So it gives it this visual blending that you do with your eyes versus over blending, which is it's a very common mistake that people make, is they start to overblend everything when they're first using digital painting programs. I was trained very classically with analog, acrylic paints, oil paints, and I always suggest to my students, and I always recommend and encourage them to always learn the real materials. There's something nice about the physicality of working with those materials that then when you translate it into the digital realm, you really do have a better grasp of what those brushes in Photoshop, how they're going to behave, and how the visual texture that's built into the digital brush, how it relates to the real thing.